Well, hello, welcome to today's questions asked by our readers and viewers about Depakote. First question, is Depakote better tolerated than an atypical antipsychotic? That is a bit of a tongue twister, try to say that one yourself. Depakote is, for most people, better than an antipsychotic. And antipsychotics have a lot of side effects, a lot of backbites that, Depakote's not a great drug. It can interfere with your sugar metabolism, have you put on a lot of weight, and also makes you feel like a slug, but it's generally a lot easier to get off of when you do decide to come off of it than an antipsychotic. Next question, what are some of the reasons why people end up on Depakote? Well, here, the reasons why we see people on it is because of mental health things. People do get put on this drug for seizures, but it's more kind of in conjunction with antipsychotics for being bipolar, or as an adjunct to an antipsychotic in the case of schizophrenia or schizoaffective. However, those meds can oftentimes be given to people who have had almost normative human reactions to unnatural circumstances. Like when we're put under a lot of stress and we haven't been eating right and our blood sugar drops and whatever beliefs that we've had about our spiritual life are suddenly coming into call and question why we're even here in the first place, and all that loads up into some sort of event. Any of us could have some sort of psychotic, whatever, that could be transitory, that then people get put on these drugs, and it may not be as transitory as it would have been without the drugs. Which leads us into our next question. How often does someone with a brief psychotic disorder develop a physical dependence for antipsychotics prescribed and later relapses into psychosis when tapering the medication and gets re-diagnosed as schizophrenic? Now, this is kind of a long question, but basically what this reader is asking is, when you're coming off an antipsychotic, right, what these drugs do, and people don't think of antipsychotics as being addictive. In all actuality, the way that they rewrite the nervous system or adapt the nervous system in order to be able to basically, if you're shutting off the reward, a perception of reward in life, your body's going to figure out ways to try to up that game a little bit. What that is called is upregulation. So if you're stopping, let's say this is dopamine trying to come through, if you're stopping the dopamine and only a little bit of it gets through, right? The synapses. What the body does on the receptive end of the receptors is it will just build more receptors. So the little bit that's getting through has a higher chance of hitting something. Okay, so now imagine if you've got upregulated receptors that are like, I don't know, they're kind of like when the new iPhone comes out and people over at wherever people wait for iPhones, Amazon or something, and they're screaming for the new iPhones, and there's no iPhones, and all of a sudden a few little iPhones get through, all these receptors are going, with the dopamine, and they go, wow. That's a natural neuroadaptation that would happen to anybody in the presence of these drugs, and even more so to someone that's kind of, prone to mania and elevated thoughts in the first place. So when you take that drug away, and you get a near normal amount of dopamine hitting excessively receptive and hypertonic receptors, then you can have a big problem. And it will look like you're relapsing in psychosis just trying to come off the medication. It's like if somebody's coming off of alcohol and they have a headache, the prescription is not for them to take more alcohol so the headache goes away. It might be to an addict, but like we know what a hangover looks like. We know, well, some people know what coming off of a cocaine bender looks like, or a heroin addiction. And they can attribute those mechanisms to what you go through in withdrawal. Well, there are withdrawal mechanisms for psychiatric medication, and the ones for the antipsychotics are the worst. Because when a person goes psychotic, they feel pretty good. And their tendency for them to slow it down or to do something that is going to interrupt that is probably slim, and they won't listen to anybody, and it's just a mess. But it's not necessarily their underlying symptoms. It is often a withdrawal manifestation. What challenges have we faced tapering off of Depakote? Well, not as many as tapering off antipsychotics. I mean, one of the mechanisms that we have used is to up a person's Depakote so that they can come off the antipsychotic easier. But in tapering off of Depakote, I mean, it is an anti-seizure medication, so a person can be more cramped up, a little bit tense, elevated in their moods, anger, wanting to smash things, and feeling excited and unable to sleep and not wanting to eat. And those are not the best signs. And if you slow down, usually it's a little bit more okay. How do you know when it's time to stop antipsychotics? Well, for most people, it's before we even start them. But if you are on medications such as antipsychotics, it is a personal choice as to when you stop them. However, it would be a bad choice to try to stop them when you are not in a stable position in the first place. You're not around stable people and you don't have a lot of help, and you're trying to stop them abruptly. That is almost guaranteed to be another trip to the hospital. When you are ready to stop antipsychotics, you have support people around you, people that understand what you may be going through. You might even have to sign a contract with these people, or at least one person that you trust that you will listen to if you get so out of pocket that you're not listening to anybody, to go back up on your meds or to slow down or something. And whatever may have served the purpose of bringing some reward into a person's life while they're on antipsychotics may be exactly the things that need to go while they're going through withdrawal. So self-medicating with caffeine or with any other type of stimulants, up to and including sugar, or junk food, or even aspartame, diet sodas and stuff. When the person's so tranked out on antipsychotic, that stuff may have no effect. But you start coming off an antipsychotic and you're still doing that stuff, it's a good chance that you're going to tip completely over the edge and have to back up and punt on your medication withdrawal. Next question. Dr. Whittaker argues psychiatric medications taken in heavy doses for a long period of time may be turning episodic disorders into chronic disabilities. Is this true or false? Okay, so the question here is saying, people have these episodes. They may happen seasonally, like every fall, or they may happen every time they try to get back into college or something. But otherwise, in between those periods of time, they might be high functioning. What Dr. Whittaker, based on this question, is saying that these medications can turn that intermittent thing into a constant thing. Yeah, these medications have definitely the capacity to make a chronic consumer of the medications. And I mean, if you look at somebody that's on these medications, their spirit is generally not there. It's just taken away in some level. You can see, and they slump over, because they don't have anything in the reticular activating system that would elevate their dopamine enough for them to hold even their posture. All right. So when people are coming off this stuff, it's very difficult for them to come off of it. And so it turns a person into a low functioning person on some level. Now, those things have to be considered on a case-by-case basis. Are there some people that have a better quality of life because they take antipsychotics? Yes. Are there people who can do things naturally and not have to mess with these things in the first place? A lot more than people think. Most of what is getting people into these situations is the stuff they have in their refrigerator, the people they have in their house, and their lack of wanting to get out and move their body, and probably a lot of the drugs that they're doing already. And that is a symbol of truth that people overlook, we think it's too simple. Move your body, eat right, get around good people, and stop doing stuff that is not good for you. If you can't smoke pot without going crazy, then don't smoke pot. You may not be like your friend who can smoke pot or drink or eat pizza or whatever all that is, and you do it and you go crazy. Then stop doing it. We can't fix all these problems in our life with medications. I mean, we can try, but then you're medicated, and then you look like you're medicated, and your life becomes medicated, and you become a chronic disability, basically. I mean, it's a personal choice. If you want to move your body and you want to put stuff in your refrigerator that actually resembles food that will create mental health in the first place, and you want to get out of these relationships that are just completely whacked, that are making you feel like you are lesser of a person, or you're being persecuted all the time, or you have other things that are just not allowing you to grow in your spirit, and you're sitting around in the house all day watching TV and Facebook and not moving your body, of course you're not going to feel right. Now, if you're doing all those things right, then you probably don't need a heavy-duty antipsychotic, and if you do, you are in a very rare few, like maybe 3 out of 1,000,000. And instead, the majority of our society is getting, not the majority, but much of our society is being pushed into medications to fix things that they need to fix themselves. Next question. Has anyone successfully used CBD oil in place of antipsychotic medications to treat psychosis, or used it to taper off of antipsychotics? Yes. Yes, because now this is some of my theory that the marijuana plant is a whole plant, right? The THC in high enough concentrations would make, if you sprayed it on an opposing army, they would go so stoned that they couldn't even know which end of the gun to shoot, right? CBD is an antipsychotic in its own right. It is what they call an NMDA inhibitor. And what that means is it blocks glutamate. Glutamate is the most stimulating, natural occurring transmitter in your central nervous system. So it kind of buffers that a little bit. It probably is what keeps people from going psychotic from the THC in the first place. And it is a good antipsychotic. Does it work for everybody as an antipsychotic? No. Have I seen people that took just CBD go complete looped? Yes, but not very often. So especially if you're the type of person that smokes the pot because you like the good sedating effects and it makes the voices go away or something, but then there's consequences on the back end where you're not breaking down the THC and it's lasting in your system and you're ending up back in the hospital or something, maybe try the CBD as an adjunct or a complete replacement for the THC and see how that goes. And one of the things I've noticed with the CBD products is for people that are severely symptomatic, having severe anxiety or psychosis, they might need to triple the dosage that is normally recommended on the bottle. Next question. Do antipsychotics cause extrapyramidal side effects? Why do they cause it? Well, in certain genetically vulnerable people, there are, like any drug, any poison, basically, because drugs are poisons, the body has to break them down into metabolites that the body can then get rid of, which are usually water-soluble metabolites that you can urinate out, poop out, sweat out, spit out, cry out, somehow get them out of your body. Otherwise, they will accumulate. If you do not have the enzymes to break these things down, they can accumulate. People without certain enzymes cannot break down drugs in the same way that other people can, whether it's alcohol, whether it's THC, or whether it's an antipsychotic. And if it's an antipsychotic and it's accumulating in your system, it can accumulate in your nervous system to the point where you're having a counter effect, literally what would look like a paradoxical or the opposite of what you'd expect reaction to the antipsychotic, where instead of sedating the person and causing them to, drool on themselves and lose their posture and be pretty much tranquilized out, they're actually elevated. They're unable to sit still. They're walking around and pacing, wanting to punch at things. They feel angry and hostile inside and can't make it shut off. Those are symptoms that may lead to what they call extrapyramidal symptoms, such as tardive dyskinesia, which could be irreparable, and it is not a pretty disorder. And by and large, the medical professionals are not giving informed consent about tardive dyskinesia, or that there is a high percentage, about 16% of the population has a genetic polymorphism on what's called the CYP2D6 that could contribute to these extrapyramidal symptoms in the presence of atypical and other antipsychotics. And they should, because people should know that this can happen and be able to weigh it out for themselves. Is it worth it to me to have this or to deal with this? And then make an informed choice. That is patient rights, and people have the right to know these things. And unfortunately, oftentimes they don't find out about any of this until after something's gone bad. Is Depakote a good bridge to get off of antipsychotics? The simple answer here is yes, because getting off an antipsychotic, it's not even like getting off of a benzodiazepine. If you go too fast on getting someone off of a benzodiazepine, they will probably tell you, because they will be like, I'm going too fast. People coming off of an antipsychotic may not tell you. You may not see them again. They may just take off and try to walk to Jerusalem or something. So doing the antipsychotic slowly is I mean, it is a matter of just logical pragmatics. You go too fast on this, and you can have a bad, people get involuntarily committed and put into state institutions when sometimes all they did was withdraw off their medication too fast, and could have been successful if they'd have done it slower or had the support around them that they needed. Depakote, what we have done in not all cases, but some, we raise the Depakote up. At the same time, we're taking the antipsychotic off. If you're on both the Depakote and if you're on both Depakote and an antipsychotic, typically you want to get off the antipsychotic first because it is the more challenging drug, and leave the Depakote alone, or even raise the Depakote as you're coming off the antipsychotic. Because if you do it the other way, you get off the Depakote, which is going to be pretty easy if you're on, generally pretty easy if you're on an antipsychotic, then you're basically painted into a corner where you have nothing that's going to support the vacillations of trying to get off the antipsychotic. So generally trying to get off the hardest drug first is a strategy for most medication withdrawals, and to buffer those withdrawals with things like Depakote. Even though Depakote in its own right is a totally horrifically dirty drug, it's better than antipsychotics for the most part. If you can do this with gabapentin or nothing as a bridge medication, great, but you know, it's like the lesser of two evils. And generally people, once they get off the antipsychotic, can get off the Depakote a lot easier. Next question. Do some people need drugs like Depakote? For their quality of life, maybe. Personally, yeah. I mean, if you're having seizures and you're a child or something, and you know, you're having actual damage because of having the seizures, and yes, you need anti-seizure medication. We don't work with autistic people, but what I see there, maybe some of those folks do need some sort of medication. If you've got some kind of organic brain damage where you are unable to function without some sort of inhibitory medication, and that's what is the best out of all the different options, then yes. However, the way not me, but the way we as a society dump drugs on people is like, it's the antithesis of science. It is like random drug testing, but the random drug looks like a bowl of drugs sitting on a psychiatrist's desk saying, here, try the purple one. I mean, it really is not that far off from being ridiculously unscientific. Last question. Would I taper my antipsychotic or my Depakote first? I do believe we covered that. Generally, you would want to taper your antipsychotic first and then leave the Depakote, or maybe even raise the Depakote as you're doing the antipsychotic withdrawal. It's a guide, it's not a rule. None of this is the whole thing. The whole notion of medication withdrawal is an art form. There are no hard and fast rules. There's only pragmatic steps. And if you've been on an antipsychotic for Every year you've been on an antipsychotic, especially if it was prescribed for some sort of thought disorder, whatever you want to call it, some sort of elevated situation. In other words, not for just insomnia, but for some sort of, you were having not sleeping, not eating, and having some sort of reality that's different than what most people see to a large degree. Then it's about 1 month for every year you've been on that antipsychotic to get back off of it. And I know unless you've got some sort of tardive dyskinesia or some extrapyramidal symptoms that you need to get off of it quick, you might want to do it slow. And just respect the process. Respect your body's own. It took a while for you to adapt to these things. You have to respect the physiology of how long it's going to take to neural adapt to not having the drug. It's not about how long it takes the drug to get out of your body based upon the half-life. It's how long does it take your body to get used to having the drug out of its body based upon how the nervous system has rewired itself in the presence of the drug. Hopefully this has given you enough information to make good decisions. However, those decisions do need to be made with your medical provider. We are not giving you medical advice. This is only for information purposes based upon what we've seen here. And since we have not seen you here, you are not our patient. Please discuss anything you've heard with your doctor before you act on any of it. Thank you very much.